Do you have a 5K coming up? Here are the 5 biggest mistakes I see runners making all the time when they race a 5K. All right, so one of the biggest mistakes I see, and mistake number 1 that happens way too often, is people who run a 5K do not warm up properly. Now, when we warm up, we do it for a couple reasons. 1, we want to increase the muscle contraction speed and the force throughout our legs. Those muscle contractions generate heat, and that heat helps increase the muscle temperature, which speeds up the process, which makes the cell contract faster and makes it move with more force. Now, I know that's a whole lot of physiology, but just know you want more contraction speed and force as you're running. The second thing that happens is your blood vessels dilate. So when something dilates, it gets bigger. And when you're running and trying to run fast, you want as much blood as possible going to the big muscles and helping the oxygen get delivered there. So when you warm up, you're opening those blood vessels up, you're getting more blood to the big muscles so you can run faster, more efficiently, and have more oxygen going where it needs to. Now, there's a lot of research that shows when you should warm up and how to warm up, but here's a simple thing to remember, and I call it the rule of 15. So the first part of the rule of 15 is your warm-up should last less than 15 minutes. There's a lot of research that shows when you're warming up more than 15 minutes actively, you're actually using up too much energy and you're doing more damage than you are good. The second part of that rule of 15 is finish less than 15 minutes before the race, meaning don't warm up an hour before the race and then sit around for half an hour. Your warm-up should last and be done within 15 minutes of go time. The second mistake I see way too often is people going out too hard. Now, here's what happens. You show up to a race, you see all the young guys that go out and they take off going so fast and then they sprint and then they end up coming back to you. Well, what happens when you go out too hard? Well, first of all, your heart rate jumps up too quickly. Now, when you're running at that hard of a level, your heart is trying to keep up and pump the blood and pump the oxygen through your body. So when your heart rate spikes too quickly, you're now having to run longer at an elevated heart rate. And a lot of the time, your heart's pumping too fast and you just crash. And you crash and burn, hit that wall, and you slow down, and it's a bad day. So here's how you combat that. Go out aggressive, but stay within your range, meaning don't get caught up in the excitement of the race. Avoid that chaos that first 400 meters. You want to go out hard, get your position, get your body used to running fast, and then maintain as you go. The third mistake I see way too often is not knowing the course. Now, when I was in high school, I ran a pretty big cross-country race called the Foot Locker South Championships up in North Carolina. Back in the day, there used to be a pretty big hill right in the middle of the course, like kind of around the 2 to 3K mark. Now, what would always happen is people would go out super hard the first mile because it was a long straightaway. Then all of a sudden, this hill would pop up. And the people who went out too hard would be barely hanging on that climb. And the people who timed it right and ran smart would attack the hill and eat up the downhill and actually surge past all the people that went out too hard. So when you're preparing for a race, make sure you study the course, whether that's the morning of before the race starts or online when you register or looking at maps or whatever. Just know the course. Know where the hills and downhills are. Know if there's anything like aggressive turns. Study the final 400 meters because you do not want to be one of the runners that thinks you're at the finish, but really you got a whole way to go and you end up getting past. Mistake number 4 is saving too much for the last mile or the final kilometers. So there's one common race strategy, and I know there's a lot of different ones, but the one I'm going to talk about right now is to go out hard, go out fast, relax in the middle kilometers or middle mile, and then try and kick the final K or the final mile or so. Now, this doesn't always happen, but I see it very often. What happens is runners will relax too much during that middle area, but their heart rate does not come back down. And when your heart rate does not come back down, you're not really recovering the way you think you are. Your legs may be going slower, but your heart is still pounding and still going the same pace it was. So when you slow down too much that middle kilometer or the middle mile, your heart rate and lactic threshold are still way high and you're not really benefiting at all. That's actually making it harder for you to really pick up the pace the final mile or final kilometer. And mistake number 5 is coasting into the finish. Now, this is one I personally used to struggle with quite a lot. When you see the finish, you see it up ahead and you're like, okay, I'm just going to wait till the final 50 meters to kick. Well, it's a 5K. Here's the thing. You're already running hard. It's going to hurt for a minute or two. So might as well just pound it out and get to that finish line as hard and as fast as you can. Put your foot on the gas all the way to the finish. One thing that I tell all my athletes is when you see that finish line, you should be going all out. Now, granted, if you're like a mile away, be smart about it. But when you get to that final, 100, 200, 300, even 400 meters and you can see where you're going, you want to be pushing as hard as you can. You want to be pushing your foot on the gas And I always tell my runners to imagine that there's a big door that's about to close. And if you need to survive, you have to get through before that door closes. So you're going to run as hard as you can. Don't save it for the final 50 meters. Kick as hard as you can, because you could get 5, 6, 7 seconds by pushing a little bit harder. Once you get to the finish line, then you can slow down. Then you can cross the line, you can sit down, lay down, pass out, whatever you want to do. But get to that finish line as fast and as hard as you can. Bonus mistake, and this is honestly one of my biggest pet peeves, is do not stop your watch before the finish line. I see it all the time. I see runners start approaching the finish line and they have one hand on their wrist and they're crossing the line with their arms in front of them, like almost like they're saying a prayer. So cross that finish line first. Every single race, or the majority of races nowadays, are chip timed, and you're going to get your time from the chip anyway. So who cares if there's a second or two lost from your watch? So when you cross that finish line, then you can stop your watch. But before you get there, you drive and you push as hard as you can. And that's it. Those are the 5 biggest mistakes I see when you're preparing to race a 5K. So be sure to hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, hit one of the links down below to go see one of my other videos where I talk about how to run a specific time in a 5K. And we will see you in the next video. Peace.